Tonight on Ukraine Today, the Ukrainian strike on Russian drones. How will the attack on a UAV plant in Yelabuga affect the war? British troops on the Ukrainian front. Under what condition is London ready to consider joining a peacekeeping mission in Ukraine? North Korean casualties in Russia's war. Why is Pyongyang hiding the number of its soldiers killed and wounded? G7 summit in Canada. Will there be a meeting between the presidents of Ukraine and the United States? And between democracy and dictatorship, what's wrong with Putin's birthday call to Trump? All that and more in tonight's episode of Ukraine Today. Hi there, we're from Ukraine. My name is Volodymyr Robchun. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and let's go. Ukrainian defense forces hit a drone production facility in Yelabuga, Tatarstan. The General Staff of Ukraine has confirmed the strike. This Russian military-industrial site was used for building, testing and launching attack drones against Ukraine, especially against energy infrastructure and civilian targets. Ukrainian long-range weapons reached the area of the target. The outcome of the attack is being clarified. Russia is advancing in Luhansk and Donetsk regions. That's according to Deep State. Meanwhile, the Institute for the Study of War reports that Russian troops launched an offensive toward the Dnipropetrovsk region from 3 directions at once. At the same time, Ukrainian defenders managed to liberate the village of Andriivka in the Sumy region. However, Russia has concentrated a massive force near the Sumy border, more than 50,000 troops. Details next.
We are not just holding back the onslaught, but also reclaiming our territories. It became known, following a closed meeting with Commander-in-Chief Alexander Syrsky, that the armed forces of Ukraine managed to stabilize the situation in the Sumy direction and even push the enemy back. In particular, it became known that in the Sumy region, the occupiers have concentrated about 53,000 troops who have been relentlessly assaulting our defensive line for several days. However, despite such efforts, our fighters managed to recapture the settlement of Andriivka from the enemy and carry out successful counter-operations.
As a summary of these days,
based on recent results, special gratitude is owed to the soldiers of the 225 separate assault regiment for their offensive actions in the border areas of the Sumy region, particularly for liberating Andriivka. Thank you very much, guys. I would also like to mention today the 425 separate assault regiment for their successful actions in our Pokrovsk direction.
Overall, analysts assess Russia's offensive in the Sumy direction as a continuation of the Kursk operation. By concentrating tens of thousands of soldiers there, the Kremlin sent hundreds of fighters to the death every day, which eventually produced results. As a result, the tactic was deemed successful, and now these meat-grinder assaults are continuing as part of the advance deeper into Ukraine.
Back then, the Russians managed to eventually find our weak spot, which was logistics. This Sumy-Sudzha highway was the only lifeline connecting our contingent with the main forces. By cutting it off and threatening encirclement, they forced us to retreat closer to the border. Right now, the Russians are repeating the same tactic in a formulaic way, trying, though not without some success, to cut off our forces in the Sumy region from the main forces by severing the Sumy-Sudzha highway, and this time it's already on our territory.
However, the occupiers are only able to reach Sumy in their propaganda talk shows. In reality, the occupation of the regional center is completely out of the question according to the military. The Russians simply do not have enough reserves concentrated there for such an operation. But the real objective is to inflict the maximum terror on the local population of the city.
the goal was to get as close to Sumy as possible so that the city could be shelled by FPV drones and artillery, tube artillery. At that time, indeed, some Russian figures claimed that they had already gained the ability, as of about the middle of last week, to shell Sumy with FPV drones. They were very pleased about this. But now we see that, according to the president and the available sources, it has been possible to push the enemy back.
Just as, in fact, the situation has been improved in another hot spot in the direction of Pokrovsk, our troops are indeed recording minor successes by Russian forces there. However, the results claimed by propagandists are still a long way off.
In the main directions of attack, the pressure continues, and the fighting remains very fierce and intense. Both in the Pokrovsk direction and between Pokrovsk and Kostiantynivka, and to the south of Pokrovsk, in the Novopavlivka direction, their situation there is very difficult, and also in the Lyman area, for the most part, where they are having some successes. But to say that they can now break through the defenses there and reach operational Depno, that's not the case. Our forces are countering them, and they don't have enough resources.
The Dnipropetrovsk direction also remains on the agenda. According to the president, the Russians are spreading disinformation here, trying to at least set foot on the administrative border by sending in small sabotage and reconnaissance groups, and from time to time publishing photos claiming that Russia has already reached this area. At the same time, they conveniently forget to mention that when the saboteurs return to their units after another information psychological operation, they are regularly eliminated by the armed forces of Ukraine.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom. Support independent Ukrainian journalism so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. Click the link in the description to become our sponsor. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe. It really helps. Russia attacked Kyiv. A Russian drone crashed in the middle of a private neighborhood. Earlier, the city of Kremenchuk was hit. Energy and agricultural infrastructure were damaged. This was reportedly the most massive strike on Kremenchuk since the start of the full-scale war. Fortunately, there were no casualties.
This was a combined strike. Pure evil, carefully planned to hit our civilian infrastructure, our energy system. The Russians used different types of missiles, SRUs, ballistic and aeroballistic, plus Iranian drones, Shaheds, just to make it harder for our air defense. We managed to shoot down many of the missiles and drones. Luckily, no people were hurt, but unfortunately, our energy infrastructure was damaged. And this is just another spit in the face of the global efforts to stop Russia's war. It came right after Putin's talk with Trump, right after the Americans asked us not to strike Russian energy facilities. And at the same time, Putin's trying to look like some kind of mediator in the Middle East, trying to help his friends in Tehran. All of it is just incredibly cynical.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
More than 6,000 North Korean troops have been killed or wounded while supporting Russia's war against Ukraine. That's according to Bloomberg, citing British intelligence. Reportedly, Pyongyang has initially sent over 11,000 soldiers to Russia's Kursk region. North Korea officially admitted to deploying troops to Russia only this April, and still hasn't disclosed how many were sent or how many were killed. The G7 summit has kicked off in Canada. Top of the agenda, rising tensions between Israel and Iran. Other topics include Russia's war on Ukraine and US tariffs. President Zelensky of Ukraine has been invited. A meeting between him and the US President Donald Trump is expected. Earlier, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt confirmed Trump's plans to meet several world leaders during the summit, though she didn't say exactly which ones. London is open to taking part in a peacekeeping mission in Ukraine, but only if the United States guarantees security and air cover. That's according to British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. As he put it, this must be a joint effort. Without the US, it's a no-go. On Saturday, President Trump celebrated his birthday. Congrats, of course, wishing him health and happiness. But here's the thing, guess who called him? Hint, war criminal, internationally wanted. You guessed it, Putin. Apparently, Trump was so touched he decided to tell the whole world. He even posted it on Truth Social. President Putin called this morning to very nicely wish me a happy birthday, but to more importantly talk about Iran, a country he knows very well. We talked at length. Much less time was spent talking about Russia, Ukraine, but that will be for next week. He is doing the planned prisoner swaps. Large numbers of prisoners are being exchanged immediately from both sides. The call lasted approximately 1 hour. He feels, as do I, this war in Israel-Iran should end, to which I explained his war should also end. Okay, let's unpack that. I'll ask the questions. You write your thoughts in the comments. Why did Putin call Trump? Are they that close, just casually sending birthday wishes? Why is Trump proud of chatting with a war criminal and planning to speak with him again? If Putin knows Iran so well, why hasn't he helped Washington reach an agreement with Tehran? Why did Trump emphasize that they spoke about Russia's war in Ukraine much less than about Iran? Why emphasize the prisoner swaps that were not negotiated by Trump, and why claim that they are being carried out by Putin himself? And since when does Trump care so much about Putin's opinion on Israel-Iran? Let's not forget, Putin is a man who started a brutal war in Europe and orders attacks on peaceful Ukrainian cities every single day. Here's my take. Putin is desperate to get back on the list of global power players, so he tries to talk to those who still hold real influence. Most of them have distanced themselves from him, no surprise there. But Trump still picks up the phone when Putin calls. The Russian dictator is also trying to use Trump to hold Israel back, because Israel is destroying one of the key sources fueling Russia's war, Iran's military potential. Trump is an opportunist. Any deal with him is temporary. The terms keep shifting. In that sense, he and Putin are quite similar. That might be why they get along so easily. Trump seems fixated on doing business with the Russian dictator. Whether it's part of the long-standing relationship that started long before his first term, or the influence of Steve Witkoff, or both, it's clear that the current White House occupant is holding to the smallest hint of positivity in Putin's actions just to avoid introducing new sanctions against Russia. Remember when Trump said we need 2 weeks to understand Putin's real intentions? That was almost 3 weeks ago. So, has he figured out, or does he need 2 more weeks? At this point, it feels like both Trump and Putin are just playing us. The only question is why, and that's the one I still don't have an answer to. And no, we can't ignore what's happening in the Middle East, especially now, as Israeli strikes are taking out Iranian generals, which could destroy the drone supply chain between Tehran and Moscow. Details in our next report.
They struck Tehran, but the repercussions were felt all the way in Moscow. The day before, Israel confirmed the elimination of several high-ranking Iranian military officials as a result of a massive airstrike.
That's epic. Dozens of generals have been sent to help.
During the night, the intelligence department determined that the top command of the Revolutionary Guard Air Force had gathered in an underground headquarters to prepare for an attack on the state of Israel. Air Force fighter jets attacked the headquarters where the commander of the Revolutionary Guard Air Force was present. Among the eliminated military personnel is Iranian General Amir Ali Hajizadeh. According to Israeli intelligence, he was the one who brought much grief to Ukraine. Hajizadeh was directly involved in supplying Iranian drones and their components to the Kremlin. Some components were indeed supplied by Iran to the territory of the Russian Federation in order to assemble already finished Shahid models. It is important to understand that such strikes by Israel against Iran can have significant consequences for us. In an instant, Putin lost one of his main tools of terror against Ukrainian cities. No matter how much the Kremlin boasts about import substitution or renames Iranian Shaheds as Russian gerunds, the internal components are still supplied to Moscow from Tehran and only on the personal orders of the eliminated commander of the Islamic Republic's guards.
Indeed,
the moment right now is the most favorable. Iran is not in the best situation, not in the best condition after the fall of its proxy regime in neighboring Syria, as well as the strikes that have been carried out against Hamas and Hezbollah, both of which have also been significantly weakened. And obviously, it is quite possible that Israel will take advantage of the current moment.
Significant infrastructure has been destroyed. Missile production and air defense systems. Well, a lot of things inside Iran itself. It was Israel that destroyed them. And that's why the military capabilities for carrying out strikes have been greatly weakened.
Military analysts are confident that the Kremlin is already experiencing the negative consequences of the Israeli special operation. Meanwhile, Ukraine will feel the positive effect in the coming days. They are heavily dependent on the supply of certain components, which is why we see varying numbers of launches at night. And it will only get worse from here, at least for Moscow, military experts assure. Already the day after the elimination of the Iranian generals, the Israeli Air Force struck a factory producing Shaheds and also bombed a local company that manufactures almost all radar systems in Iran. Now, following the shortage of Shahed components, the Kremlin will also be deprived of most other Iranian weaponry, which Tehran has been supplying to Russia without interruption in recent years.
Let me remind you that Iran supplied Russia not only with Shaheds, but also with artillery, ammunition, man-portable air defense systems, anti-tank systems, and helmets, bull body armor. A lot of things were supplied.
The fewer means Iran has to kill Ukrainians, the better. If Israel is the one to make this happen, that's wonderful. If Israel destroys all the entire military potential of Tehran so that as few Ukrainians as possible are killed, that's what I'm for. It would be great if Israel, using the remote capabilities of the F-35, destroyed all those factories producing Shaheds, ammunition, shells, components for ballistic missiles, and so on and so forth. Then fewer Ukrainians would be killed. What's bad about that? There's nothing bad about it. There's nothing bad about Moscow having fewer of these means. Well, even if it's just by 1%, even if it's just 1%. But that 1% could mean one person, and that person won't die in Ukraine. So why can't we approve of the destruction of Iran's military potential?
However, it must be admitted that the Russian opposition figure is seriously underestimating the Kremlin's dependence on its allies in Tehran. The cessation of arms supplies to the Kremlin could play a cruel trick on Putin and his army. Without Iranian drones, Putin loses a crucial tool of pressure and terror on Ukrainian territory, while Tehran, in turn, is left without Russian military technologies that Moscow generously shares in exchange for weapons.
In exchange for the supply of Iranian Shaheds, which are now being used to strike peaceful Ukrainian cities, Iran received Su-35 fighter jets from Russia. Russia also apparently may have shared additional technologies, but there is still a lot of uncertainty here. There are also suspicions that Iran may have supplied Ukraine with a certain number, Iran may have supplied Russia with a certain number of ballistic missiles for strikes against Ukraine.
So, with a single strike, Israeli forces managed to hit two representatives of the axis of evil on the world map at once. And what is even more important, according to the IDF, this is only the beginning of a large-scale operation to undermine both the Iranian and Russian dictatorships.
An Iranian missile attack has killed 5 Ukrainian citizens in Israel, including 3 children. At least 23 Israelis and foreigners were killed overall. More than 400 were injured. Our deepest condolences to those who lost loved ones. Iran's actions mirror Russia's. Israel strikes military targets. Iran deliberately hits civilians. That's all for today. Thank you for being with us. We read your comments and we feel your support. Strength to Ukraine's defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and see you tomorrow.